Paco interview, Mr. Fragrant by Atrium. If you like fougères or like Green Irish Tweed type of vibes, this is definitely going to be for you. For the vast majority of this fragrance, you're going to have a very like woodsy with a little bit of green and a little bit of sweetness. If I had to describe it, I think it'd be a massive improvement on maybe like Dior 2020. Not being paid to say this, but I think it's a like 8 out of 10. Solid.
Link in the description below for our brand. Grab a free sample today. Fragrance clones that blow the original fragrances out the water. Most of the time, I'm of the camp that fragrance clones don't actually match the quality of original fragrances that they're trying to recreate. How fragrance clones work in most likelihood is that these companies that are the clone brands basically take the original formula and put them through a gas chromatography mass spectrometry, so GCMS, which is a lab technique that basically lets them see the chemical compounds and the makeup of these expensive niche brands. And what they do is they probably say, okay, let's recreate the scent by using cheaper ingredients. I'm usually of the opinion that these clone fragrances aren't as good quality and usually don't last as long. Most of the time, they don't make the original fragrances redundant. However, I need to be honest with you guys, some clone fragrances I actually am extremely impressed by. This is what this video is about. I'm going to tell you about these handful of fragrances that really, in my opinion, if you have them, you really don't need to get the originals. They sort of make them redundant sometimes. Yeah, I think most of the times these fragrances will actually. I do think basically that the majority of these fragrances in the list today do smell better than the original fragrances, and I'll explain why. They don't necessarily always smell as expensive, but when you're comparing them price tag wise, that you're spending, let's say, 1/8 of the price compared to the original fragrance, you think to yourself that this is much better value for money than the original stuff. That's sort of the premise of today's video. Let's get into the list and you'll see what I mean. First of all, we have to get the obvious one out of the way, Creed Aventus. I have a 2022 bottle. I always say that the fragrance today is not the great legendary fragrance that it used to be from even 5 years ago. I think Aventus doesn't smell as rich as it used to. It doesn't last anywhere near as long as it used to either. Bear in mind that Creed is now owned by BlackRock, so the fragrance compound likely would have changed under them, and I just don't think it's worth the money anymore. This is the clone that I think is impressively close to the original Creed Aventus. Haramain L'Aventure. This is 95% similar to Aventus's pineapple, smoky birchwood, and musky DNA. It's clean, citrusy, fresh, nice warm weather signature. I think it smells 95% similar, so this is the best clone for similarity. It lasts 8 hours, much better than my 4 to 6 hours with Creed Aventus. But if you want a clone that has the best longevity, you go for Club de Nuit Intense Man Eau de Parfum. Another popular fragrance is Jean-Paul Gaultier's Ultramal. I never thought that Ultramal ever needed a clone. It wasn't a particularly expensive fragrance, and I never really got that excited by it. It's a very sweet bubblegum pear fragrance with a lot of vanilla that is nice, loud, sweet, fun, sexy for clubbing, only in the cold weather. It's kind of extremely sweet, a little bit headache inducing. So I was like, yeah, whatever, a clone isn't that important. But then everyone kept hyping up this fragrance here, Afnan 9 PM. It is sort of like 85% similar to the original Ultramal. It's at least half the price. It is just as long lasting, but more fresh. What I like about this fragrance, why I think I would personally wear this over Ultramal is that it doesn't go as intense, it doesn't go as headache inducing as the original Ultramal. This is a fresh bubblegum fragrance that you really could wear every day in the autumn, winter, which is where Ultramal ends for its wearability, and then this could also be used in spring, so it has better wearability than Ultramal. I still get 8 to 10 hours, really impressive performance. For £20, this is a really impressive fragrance. Let's carry on with the bubblegum theme. Obviously, we all know the legendary Invictus Aqua 2016. I say obviously, but it's actually not that obvious. Some of you might not know that this fragrance was very popular in the community a few years back. It was a discontinued fragrance that a lot of people loved because it was a very salty, masculine bubblegum scent with a long-lasting performance. I do own Invictus Aqua 2016. Nowadays, you're going to spend probably a few £100s to acquire it. I don't think it's worth it. It's one of those cases where the nostalgia effect of a discontinued fragrance is really muddling a lot of people's memories of these fragrances, and it's not that great. It's definitely not worth hundreds of pounds. This is what, usually £20, £25, and it smells very close. Montblanc Legend Spirits. One of the best cheapies out there for aquatic bubblegum DNAs with a fresh, citrusy, fresh out the shower feel as well. A really great scent for young guys. It gets that Invictus Aqua 2016 DNA very close, about 90% similar, I would say, but then doesn't have that saltiness. So if you want that saltiness, you're not going to get it here, but otherwise you get a very smooth, aquatic, that smells a much higher quality than the price tag suggests. This smells like a £60 fragrance, not a £20 fragrance. This smells a little bit smoother than Invictus Aqua 2016. I do like 2016, it's not a bad fragrance. I do like the salty character of it. It does have a little bit more character than this, but this easily trumps it in terms of value nowadays. You still get decent longevity, about 6 hours. So I definitely think this is one of the best cheapies out there at the moment, and it blows the original Aqua 2016 out the water right now when you compare the prices. Similar to Ultramel, the Dior Sauvage Elixir would give me a headache easily. I would wear 2 sprays only in the dead of winter, really, really cold weather when it's most appropriate to wear it, and I'd still feel nauseated wearing that fragrance. It's extremely spicy. It is too synthetic, too dense. It's a very high concentration fragrance, you can tell. It's just got too much going on, in my opinion, making it very difficult to wear. You have to really love a spicy Middle Eastern style of perfumery. I think this fragrance is better because it's much better value for money, still has great performance, and it tones down the intensity. Lattafa Asad. Really impressive recent acquisition by myself. It's like £30, gets you 10 hours longevity, very similar fresh lavender, spicy DNA of Sauvage Elixir, but without that annoying overdose of ambroxan. There's too much ambroxan in Elixir, in my opinion. And again, similar to the original Sauvage, just the Sauvage DNA in general, often it smells better in the opening in the Sauvage fragrances, and then they get more annoying as the ambroxan becomes more apparent. This remedies this, and I think it actually is more easy to wear as a fresh daily fragrance. Honestly, both in the daytime and in the evening, if you like spicy Middle Eastern fragrances, you like something that's really masculine, this is a great cheapie to buy. As I said as well, great longevity, medium amount projection, so it's not as annoyingly loud and as annoyingly long-lasting as Sauvage Elixir. Sauvage Elixir, I got easily over 12 hours with that fragrance. This is just a little bit toned down, and I think it's actually better. Sometimes some fragrances are actually annoyingly strong, and that's the case, I think, with Sauvage Elixir. It's a good fragrance overall. I like the perfumery, but I just personally could not wear it. Sticking with the theme of ambroxan, let's talk about Bvlgari's Tygar. I think we've talked about this fragrance maybe once or twice on the channel before. If you guys don't know what it is, it's a very famous fragrance in the community because people say it's a great grapefruit fragrance. It's like a niche grapefruit scent that I think is horribly overpriced. So people say it's a grapefruit scent, but actually it's a very simple fragrance DNA. It's mainly got its nose of the grapefruit at top, sandalwood, and ambroxan. And that's it. And he's paying £300 or something like that, like £300 to buy this fragrance. That's why myself, I mean, I've only worn it once in fairness, but myself and pretty much everyone online agrees it's very much an overpriced fragrance. It's not really a grapefruit scent. To me, it's more of a sandalwood, woody fragrance. And that's why I kind of think it's too simple for the asking price. It is long lasting. It's a nice long lasting summertime fragrance that is pleasant, but I have found an alternative that you should be getting onto. Alexandria Fragrances Black Panther. I got this fragrance recently just because I heard good things about it, and this is easily a fragrance that blows the original out the water. You do not need to get the original Tygar, in my opinion, if you own this. This does this very similar DNA. I say probably 90% similar to Tygar from memory. It has less of a realistic grapefruit note. So the thing is the grapefruit, to me, the Tygar isn't much of a grapefruit fragrance because the grapefruit actually goes away after like the first 30 minutes, 1 hour. It's an opening note, so it's not gonna last too long. But this fragrance gets it very close. It's still got the grapefruits, heavy muskiness, heavy sandalwood, a little bit of ambroxan, still very long lasting, at least 8 hours, fresh. It smells extremely high quality. All this stuff for like £30 for 30 ml. Buy this 30 ml for spring and summer this year and you will be very happy. This smells so much more expensive than the price tag. Most of the times I'm not on the hype of saying, oh, you know, these cheap fragrances smell like niche fragrances. Most of the time they don't, but this does. This actually smells very, very expensive for what it is. I do like Alexandria Fragrances. I've talked about the brand several times on this channel before. I think it's one of the strongest clone houses that's out there, and Black Panther definitely deserves to be one of the best rated in the fragrance brand. This is very good stuff. I think it's an excellent clone of Bvlgari's Tygar. Get it for this warm season if you'd like. Tom Ford's Tobacco Vanille. I think it's a nice fragrance. I didn't think this would ever be cloned that well. I know there's a lot out there, but I always thought the original was always going to stay king. However, I got this sample as a free addition to another fragrance by the same brand, and I was shocked by how good this was. Al Haramain's Amber Oud Tobacco Edition. 95% similar to Tobacco Vanille, so it's got that sweet fruits gourmand tobacco vanilla combination to this fragrance. Very much a tobacco scent that smells gourmand, sweet, edible, sexy, like a nice evening fragrance. You wear this fragrance DNA on a special occasion. It's very similar in quality, very similar in scent profile, and the longevity is 12 hours. So I think it actually beats the original Tobacco Vanille a little bit. I genuinely think I would never, ever have bought Tobacco Vanille if I had this, first of all. This is gonna be what? Maybe at least a third of the price, and it's better performing, very similar quality, very similar scent profile. I don't always vouch for clone fragrances, but this absolutely nails it. I got that free sample of Amber Oud Tobacco Edition with this fragrance, which is meant to be a clone of Parfum de Marly's Layton. That is Al Haramain's Detour Noir. This fragrance shocked me as well. I didn't like the bottle presentation. Again, I was like, oh, you know, clone fragrance is getting too much hype in the community. They're not gonna smell that similar to the original, let's face it. This smells very similar to the original, actually. I'm facing it now. This is 90%, I'd say probably 90% similar in the opening. I think the first 10 minutes of this fragrance is weakest. Don't smell it up close in the first 10 minutes, but even when you spray it just in the air, you can tell this is very similar to Layton. I think it becomes more and more similar as it dries down. It's got the scent profile very close, I think maybe 95% similar actually, but maybe the texture of the fragrance, the robustness, the thickness of the musks aren't here. So the original Layton beaten in that regard, but this is what, an eighth of the price, and it lasts just as long, about 10 hours longevity with a medium amount projection. So I think, you know, you either get one or the other, but you don't need to get Layton if you own this, honestly. This does it very well. It's extremely impressive what they've done here. And finally, one of the most popular fragrances of all time is Thomas Vortigern's Oud Wood. This is a very sexy, sharp green, woody, and a little bit animalic, musky fragrance DNA for a lot of people that smells really great. A nice beginner oud scent that has been reformulated, and this clone here sort of helps against that. It's a clone that's a similar price to the fragrance, which is, you know, a big ask. If you're gonna clone a fragrance for a similar price, you have to do it better than the original to get people to switch their money over to you. This is Thameen Carved Oud. Thameen Carved Oud smells 95% similar to Oud Wood. It is an unashamed clone of the fragrance. You can definitely tell they're trying to clone Oud Wood with this scent. But in my opinion, it smells higher quality. I think they've actually used real oud here, a tiny bit of real oud compared to Oud Wood, which all smells synthetic to me. I don't think they use real oud in there. I don't know for sure, but that's what it smells like to me. This is longer lasting about 10 hours. It's thicker, more opulent, rich. It has a little bit more density, I think a bit more smokiness with the incense note in here that Oud Wood doesn't have. So it's a bit more suited to cold weather, whilst Oud Wood will be a little bit easier to wear in the spring. But I think you can wear this in the spring as well. In my opinion, this does the blend better. It smells more luxurious than Oud Wood, and it lasts longer. That is why it is worth its price tag. So it's an expensive fragrance, sample it for sure, but in my opinion, this does beat Oud Wood in its current formulation. And one last one to mention is Creed's Silver Mountain Water. This is a fragrance that I think is a bit too expensive nowadays as well, just because it lasts only like 4 to 6 hours. It's a nice green tea, metallic, fresh aromatic fragrance that, as the name suggests, will remind you of the great outdoors. However, Club de Nuit Sillage does a good job of cloning it, maybe 85 to 90% similar. It's longer lasting. It doesn't have that green tea note as much, but I think it's more masculine. It's easier for men to wear, and it's just much better value for money. I think it's very similar in the quality compared to Creed, and especially how much Creed is asking for in this price tag. That is why I would always suggest getting Club de Nuit Sillage over Creed Silver Mountain Water. And that concludes the video, guys. I think we've covered a lot of fragrances today. I always say, you know, clones aren't always gonna get it right. I'm kind of more on the side of original fragrances, getting the original stuff. I appreciate the creativity of these brands, having the perfumes actually make the fragrances in the first place. Takes a lot of time, takes a lot of money and expertise. I do respect them for that, because making perfumes is not an easy task. It's a little bit lame if someone comes along and just steals your stuff. Imagine if you created like a painting yourself, if someone just came along and said, you know guys, you know, I'll just sell his exact same work or close enough. Like basically someone just counterfeited your work. That's why clone fragrances can be a little bit lame, but I also see the argument for affordability and giving good alternatives to these mainstream brands. What are your thoughts on clone fragrances? Do you agree with my opinions on these clones, or are you gonna try any of these out now that I've mentioned them to you? I definitely think Black Panther is definitely going under the radar the most out of this entire list, so definitely try it out if you want a good summertime fragrance. I'd love to hear your opinions in the comments down below, guys, and make sure to check out our other video on clone fragrances. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye now.